Well, at Hartner, it's an important stop in a lot of ways. Not only the first superintendency, but an even more important occasion. Our oldest child was going to start to school. Back in those days, those small Kansas schools didn't have any kindergartens. I don't know if they did anywhere, but they didn't in the small schools. And he's going to be a first grader. She had first and second grades. Her classroom was just as far away from the office as they could get. When you came into the main entry because the gym was on that end of the building, my office was immediately to the left as you came in at the west entrance. If you came in at the east entrance, her room was to the left. In other words, she was just as far down that hall away from my office as a classroom could be. Well, Roy seemed to get along well in school as a beginning student, and she seemed pleased with him. He seemed pleased with her. Everything was just fine. Except, I don't know, school hadn't been on very long, and I started hearing faculty talk about a boy beating up on the superintendent's son at recess. So I sort of looked around and found a place where I could observe the primary kids when they were out on recess, and sure enough, Tommy Dyson, the son of the editor-owner, I think he was editor and owner, of the local newspaper's son, was a bigger boy, heavier, taller, and he was bullying Roy. I don't know why. I have no idea why or what. All I saw was that, yeah, the teacher gossip was right. He was getting beat up on at recess. Now, why Mrs. Elmore didn't stop that, I don't know. But the truth of the matter is that it may have been done in a way that she wasn't even aware of it. I don't know. And where I really should have gone down and talked to her about it, I took another approach. You know, I grew up, nobody fights your fights for you. Lost a few fights as a kid. Had a few fights as near as I know nobody won. Had a few I won. But if somebody wanted to fight, let's get it on. And until, I don't know how old it was, but 10, 15, 20 years ago, I ended up with a bridge from eye tooth to eye tooth. Until that happened, if you wanted to fight with me, let's decide on where and when and get it over with. And as sure as I'm sitting there as an adult, I never got in a fight, because the minute that the other guy finds out that you're not afraid of him, it occurs to him that maybe he doesn't want to fight with you, and so there's no fight. Same way as a kid. Yeah, I got into some fights, but darn few, because unless there was a rooster around that thought he could whip me and wanted to prove it, nobody messed with me. Nobody bullied me, that's for darn sure. So I observed a few times and had a little conversation with Roy at home. That Roy, I hear and I've looked and I see that Tommy Dyson gives you a bad time on the playground. What's that all about? Dad, I don't know. You know, just a little fellow. Well, I said, it doesn't really matter. But the next time it happens, you tell him stop, and if he doesn't stop, take it to him. Dad, Mrs. Elmore's got a rule, no fighting. Well, I said, there's also no bullying, and he's bullying you, and you're not going to put up with it. And if you don't fight him, but next time he bullies you, I'm going to paddle you here at home. He said, you know, he had pointed out, Mrs. Elmore said, you get paddled if you fight. And I said, if you think I wouldn't paddle you harder than Mrs. Elmore, you better think about that a while. So sure enough, a day or two later, the word comes back that the kids were fighting at recess, and Tommy Dyson, the minute that your son let into him, he'd had enough of that right quick. Good, good. But I knew I was in trouble with Mrs. Elmore. So at the end of the school day, I wasn't at all surprised to hear click, 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 click. Boy, boy, she was coming down that hall. You know, most of the teachers wear comfortable shoes to and from school, slip the high heels on to go in. And she'd slipped the high heels back on and was coming down to straighten me out. And boy, she came in. You know, I knew that I was wrong in her eyes, and so I listened while she got after me. And, you know, the problem was I created a problem for her. She had no quarrel with my son, and yet here she was going to have to paddle him. She said, "You know what my rule is." Yes, I said, "I know what your rule is. Roy knows what your rule is." And I told him that if he thought that you would whip him harder than I would, he'd better have another thought coming, that nobody's pushing him around unless he fights back and then has to take it. Ooh, she was angry. Turned around and clicked out. Didn't last long. We ended up being good friends, visited in their house more than once. Great people, both she and her husband. And I don't know, can't remember whether she paddled Roy or not. But I can almost guarantee you that if she did, she didn't put much wrist snap into the whatever she used to paddle the little guy with. And as far as I know, no trouble at all between Tommy and Roy. And that lesson is a good lesson for a kid to learn. Roy never was big physically. When he wrestled, I think he wrestled at 133, 138, something like that. And as far as I know, he was never picked on, pushed around in any way by anybody, anywhere. Middle school, high school, Navy, life. And he's been a police officer of one sort or another as a reservist everywhere he's been. And now that he's retired, he has taken a few more courses, and he does part-time police work as a paid policeman after being a volunteer in every community that he served in over the years. Thank you, Mrs. Elmore, for doing a wonderful job with our son.